The Stage Door Show, celebrating the independent artist, with Dave Hondell and Tom Klein. Welcome to The Stage Door Show. This is your host, Steve Zarro, sitting in for Dave and Tom. I'm very happy to be hosting my first episode of this podcast, and thank you all for listening. And I'm even more excited to welcome my first guest, the lovely Celia Werner from Celia Werner Productions. Thank you so much for joining us, Celia. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I mean, we've been, going back and forth on Instagram for a while. We've been, keeping up with each other. So it's great to actually, put a face to the Instagram name.
We've been talking a little bit about what you do. So if you want to take a moment, just sort of tell everybody what Celia Werner Productions is and what sort of the staple of your business is.
Mm-hmm. So Celia Werner Productions is my production company, which, the name kind of gives that away. But we do photo, video, live stream, and brand consulting. But, a lot of people don't understand when I say either pre-production or, concept development. It's all the same kind of words within making sure that whatever we make for your business or your brand makes sense to actually get the results that you need. We do a little bit of everything, but our main stuff is typically working with small businesses, nonprofits, and doing live events. We originally got into this doing weddings, but weddings can be a nightmare. Mm-hmm. So I at an early time was like, I don't want to be that 40-year-old woman walking around taking pictures at weddings. I want to build something else. So right. That is why we branched into working with small businesses.
Well, when you do a wedding, you're working weekends, which is not even the worst part. It is kind of a bummer, but you're not really able to branch out and expand the type of content you make or your creativity. You're limited by your clients' limitations, and you bring their emotional element into it. So that's got to be really challenging, I'm guessing.
So my thoughts on weddings is photo and video for weddings are two different worlds. Mm-hmm. So I do both. I prefer photo at a wedding than video at a wedding, which, coming from someone that is primarily a videographer sounds a little backwards. But when you're doing a wedding and doing photo, you are calling the shots. You are running the day. You are saying, hey, you bridesmaid over here, come over there, and they're listening to you. And when you're doing video for a wedding, you are at the mercy of, basically everything, because you are reacting to everything. You are reacting to the groomsmen running down, the aisle, or, the whatever it might be. There was one wedding I did where the groom jumped onto a chair and they were putting it like it was a bowl in the middle of the dance floor. But, if I wasn't paying attention for 10 seconds, I would have lost that. And they would have been like, I'm pretty sure that this thing happened. Where is it? Whereas if it's photos, you can be like, guys, keep going, keep going, keep going.
Right.
But you don't want your voice on the video going, keep going.
Right. So the photography element is about creating the moment, mm-hmm. and the video element is about capturing the moment. And that's where the giant broad line is drawn between the two of them, I'm guessing.
Yeah. And, I did it for years. I started doing them in 2011. I still run a photo video department for a entertainment company here on Long Island. But, it's not my typical day-to-day. If you needed to get married in 2 weeks, I could tell you exactly what vendors and how we're going to plan out the day. But, it's not my typical shoot anymore. I would say I work a lot more with small businesses and doing large scale live streams. I mean, with COVID-19 and everything, the world is a little different right now. So I'm not going out and doing events like I previously was.
COVID-19? What's
COVID-19?
What are you talking about?
I know. It's crazy.
I've heard of it.
When there were big, large events,
right.
And even up to the day that all of the news was coming out, I was in the back of a giant event with a giant on-shoulder type camera, getting video of what's happening on the stage and seeing all of these articles coming up. And I'm like, oh, I think all of the things I'm supposed to do for the next couple of weeks are going to get canceled, which was Philadelphia Comic-Con. It was a psychotherapy conference in DC, all of these different things. And I was like, all right, I guess I'm getting some time off.
Have you seen anything come back to life yet? Has there been any movement in areas that were stagnant for a while?
So it's interesting. I have seen a little bit of movement, but it's in different ways than typically for the time of year that it is. Because a big thing right now, and a big thing people are trying to figure out right now, and when I say figure out, I mean every single time that I've been asked by every different kind of person, they have a different plan, is graduations, virtual graduations. So there have been people that are like, we're going to submit all of the photos to you. Great, perfect. There have been people that are like, we want you to come to the auditorium and film the students walking across the stage and cut that all together with all the speeches. And I'm like, okay,
So it's like a
fine.
Jurassic Park graduation, and you're just creating things that didn't happen.
Exactly. And
Out of thin air.
and making the kids come there to come do it, and obviously spacing them out for health reasons. And then there was another one. What was the other one? They wanted to do it's kind of like a drive-by graduation, so everything's different and everyone's asking for different things. And I think the kicker, the funniest one, is there was a school that wanted to bring, the company I work with has big projection screens, and they're doing some of those drive-in movie theaters that people are seeing pop up.
Right.
But they wanted to do the projection screen, but space out all of the chairs across the football field 6 feet apart in every direction.
I can't imagine that being an easy night to get through.
No. So there's all these different ideas out there. And I think that, like earlier I mentioned, we do concept development. I think that the biggest problem is these educators know what they're trying to do in terms of the experience for everyone, but they don't really think about what goes into creating that experience.
Right.
So
they have no concept of the feasibility.
Mm-hmm.
They have the end game, the end goal they want out of it, and they leave the rest up to you. They don't grasp how much ground there is in between that you have to cover creatively to make something happen. I mean, even the parents who want to send you the pictures, I'm guessing, what do they want you to do? Compile the photography into a single image so that it looks like the kids are all together or something?
No, it's having their homeroom teacher read the names off, and then the picture of each of the kids will show up. This is actually an 8th grade graduation. So it'll pop up with the student's name, it'll fade up with the picture.
Oh, like slideshow kind of?
Basically. So it'll have the speeches and everything as it would typically, but it has the faces and the names of the students popping up so that their parents can go, oh, look, oh, there's Johnny. Like, so that the family has that moment and they still get to experience that, even though obviously 8th grade graduation is not happening in person this year.
Right.
So that is the intention behind it. But I don't think that the educators, reached out at an early enough point, because the one where I said that everyone's going to walk across the stage, they now have to figure out how to coordinate 380 kids throughout doing that process. But they also promised the parents that the parents can give the diploma. So now they have to move the parents and the kids and coordinate so that the parents are on one side of the stage and the kids are on the other side of the stage, and there's a speaker and the speaker's going to say the name, but we need to coordinate so that it doesn't take too much time for the kid to get across the stage. It's just a whole process. And this is the thing that a lot of people don't really think about in terms of the practicality of not only obviously graduations, but different kinds of shoots. So I mentioned that I work a lot with the live streams, and a lot of the pictures that a lot of people see on my Instagram are from when I'm doing larger shoots like that. But that's the kind of shoot where you have to have a plan. So if you have people entering and exiting the stage, that needs to be coordinated ahead of time. And
rehearsed,
you can't
exactly. Yeah, you have to rehearse that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't think about that, or they don't think about, we need an internet connection if we're going to live stream out. Like, you don't want to be chancing that on a big stream and, testing out all the microphones and all of these things that we as people that work in audio visual are like, oh, okay, we're going to get there 3 hours early. And they're like, why are you getting there 3 hours early? It's because you need to leave time if there's a problem.
Right.
And,
it's because I don't have time to get there 5 hours early.
Exactly. So these are the kinds of things that people, I feel like, need the guidance on, and that's why I'm trying to move into that space where I can say, hey, like, you're planning this large event. I will guide you through what you need for the planning and what you need so that you can get the best result for your live stream, your video, or whatever it may be.
Now, you can't turn back time, though. I mean, what you're talking about, the planning an event like this with the coordination of this volume of people and the task that each one of them has to do to walk up, to be spaced out, the testing of the equipment, the arrangement of all this. This is something they would have needed to start planning the day they pulled the plug on school back in March, right? I mean, we're both in New York. I've been home with my 5-year-old since March 13th, which was a Friday.
Mm-hmm.
And we spent the first, I don't know, 6, 7, maybe even 8 weeks of this process wondering week to week whether or not it was going to end and he was going to go back. So they didn't pull the trigger on any of this planning because they didn't ever think that it was going to end. And then when it finally did, it was, even if they started that day when they finally closed it all down for the year, it was already not enough time, right?
See, these requests have come in the last 2 weeks because a lot of the schools have said, like, let me wait, let me see if we're going to be able to do something in July, like an in-person event. But I think with, the weather getting nice, people going outside, we already saw a little bit of a jump with coronavirus with people from Memorial Day weekend, and we'll see what happens like in the next couple of weeks. But I don't think that they expected for this to go on this long, and they expected to be able to have a group larger than like 50 by July. So now they're trying to figure out how to go from, we're going to do something in person, to, hey, we need to give some sort of experience online, whether that's, like I said, the pictures, or doing something where the kids come in spaced out, safely, compliant, and it's been a process to help people figure out how they need to kind of coordinate everything. I told them that they better have some walkie-talkies.
Yeah, they're definitely going to need some way to communicate. You take however many kids, 350 eighth graders times plus 2 parents and maybe a sibling each, a grandparent. You've now got all these devices, all these cell phones. Yeah. You don't have anywhere near the bandwidth for that. You don't have the equipment, and you don't. If one person misses the rehearsal or the walkthrough or the whatever, it's a cluster F. I have some experience with live events. It definitely takes some putting on. You can't just slap it together with a bunch of with an entire class of graduating 8th graders who've never done this before.
Mm-hmm. And I would say, and like, I'm not trying to like tangent too far into this, but I would say that the fact that they're trying to figure things like this out, it's really important to have someone come in who has experience with live events, who has experience with AV, because I feel like sometimes places try and cut corners with the budget because they're like, oh, this person will do it cheaper. But the thing is, that person doesn't have, 10 plus years of experience in how to run this. And that person might just be reacting to whatever the things happening are, not getting the best possible, angle, or not the best possible timing, or they don't know that someone's supposed to come in stage right. So I think having just someone who knows and understands how to kind of order things and how to communicate what they need is very important.
Well, your expertise is part of the service you provide as an entrepreneur and as a business person, right? It's not just the pointing the camera. It's not just the providing the file. Your consultation, your advice on the branding, the direction, the theme, whether it's the 8th grade graduation or the Saturday wedding or the corporate video, your knowledge, your wisdom, your expertise is essential. It's similar in my business as well. So that's awesome to hear. And you were talking about how you started with a point and shoot camera when you were in middle school. So now I'm guessing that was a gift. And then, so how quickly did that turn into a gift, go from being a gift to being like a list of projects? Oh, I want to take these kind of pictures and those, when did that really start to blossom for you?
So backtracking, I had a small red Canon point and shoot camera in 8th grade. That was the first real camera, I'm putting like the air quotes, that I got. And then in high school, I got my first DSLR. And then my Nana was like, hey, my friend Peter is throwing a party. I want to give him a gift. You take nice pictures, so can you come and take pictures at this party? So me and my little Canon flash, like we came, we took pictures. It went well. I had to learn like on the fly how to use a flash in a dark room, because obviously like if you're going and taking pictures of the basketball team or something like that, there's already existing light. You just need to figure out how to kind of do it.
Right.
So I kind of crash coursed through a lot of things. And then when I got to college, obviously being someone that went through a television and film program at Hofstra University, they had some higher end cameras for me to use. At the time, they had some JVC, like big like shoulder mount cameras. They had all of the studio cameras, because they have like a full functioning studio with like a couple of sound stages and things like that. I remember when the 70D was like super new, and like they had a bunch of those, and
Right.
it was just really cool to get my hands on a lot of these different technologies and learn the different kinds of cameras, the different kinds of styles, because shooting something on a GoPro versus shooting something on a large camcorder is going to be a completely different look and a completely different experience. So you need to figure out obviously which thing is going to go with with what you're shooting and what you're going to use. So being able to be exposed to the different things, starting with my point and shoot camera and starting with, oh, I'm taking my photography class, we need to figure out how to take a picture of a tree, to going to college and learning, oh, if you're going to do an interview setup, or if you're going to do something with an artsy feel, you need to light it this way, you need to do it that way.
Right.
And it was a great kind of, I would say, sequence of events to get, I would say, the largest array of different kinds of shoots for when I started my business. And I was kind of doing it during college. I was working through college, doing different events and small business projects. But it gave me a varied background to have that knowledge going into creating my business, and being able to speak to and talk people through the different types of projects that they were trying to accomplish.
Now, you're a few years younger than me. I graduated high school in 93, so I'm 45. I'm guessing I don't know exactly how old you are, but I'm guessing from the time you got that point and shoot, you probably had access to digital and internet and Google and research and YouTube. So it sounds like you went on a fact-finding mission. You went on a hunt looking for the education, for the knowledge and the wisdom. And even though you had digital available for most, if not all, of your creative life, it was important for you to go back and learn how to develop film in a dark room and how to use a flash. Like that type of the industry respect is important, and I wanted to highlight that because that jumped out at me when you were talking about that. Someone your age, a creative person, a business person, an entrepreneur your age, wouldn't necessarily be so inclined to go backwards and backfill some of those older skills like you did. That's
Yeah,
important.
I actually in high school, obviously, like in my photo class, we did the whole darkroom thing. But in college, for one of my classes, I had to shoot an entire film on 16 millimeter, like analog black and white film.
Oh my
It was
God.
literally like you shot the film and you had to go on the giant steam back machine and you had to cut and tape the film. And that was like one of the classes. And so a year or two after I took that class, like they cut it and replaced it with digital. But
Oh,
I actually like physically, like when people say like, oh, cut this and move this and
yeah.
and like fade it here, like I physically had to do those things.
Yeah.
So it really I feel like it gives you a different, obviously appreciation, but a different outlook on what you're actually doing. Because when you're working with film, like you don't have 6 prints of this film. Like when you're on a timeline and you're editing on a timeline, you could change it, you can bring it back, you can do whatever you need. But if you have this one reel of film, and
That's
this
it.
is the one thing you have,
That's it.
if you mess
Yeah.
it up, it's done.
I'm surprised they cut it because the class you were talking about, I would have thought that it would have been an interesting way to, how should I say, promote respect for the freshman class coming in and say, hey, before you go to do digital editing, before you go work on a digital audio workstation, or you work in Pro Tools or Final Cut or Premiere, here, you're going to spend a semester doing this stuff. you're going to burn your fingerprints off doing this, splicing film and tape together. That way, at least they see how it was done, and then they just sort of be done with it. You never have to do it again, but it'll then give you a newfound respect for what it's like to work digitally. Like if I had to do voiceover editing reel to reel instead of digital audio, it would have been a whole different ballgame. The education requirement would have taken 3 times as long. The equipment requirement, the space requirement, the technological hardware requirement would have been ridiculously overwhelming compared to what it's like to do it digitally. But I've done it because I've done videotape editing in high school. We were talking about the 8th grade thing before. All it had me thinking of was Video Club, doing a frame to frame, VHS to VHS. But no, it was interesting that you got a chance to do that though before they cut it. So you probably feel a huge advantage over some of your other peers and colleagues who didn't even. Some of them might not even know that such a process ever existed.
Yeah, it's interesting. They basically restructured the class to lend towards digital, and it was like the intro to film class. So like it was where you're learning kind of how the different things work. But they still have it in the cinematography class, and it's cinematography and lighting. So you have to learn how to change the reels for like the film and things in those classes as well. But I think that you have a really good point with, having the physical experience with those things, because you can't go out and find like, a Steambeck machine that you can just go and use somewhere. The fact that they incorporated that into their curriculum was really interesting, and it's something that I can make jokes about. Like, not that it's like a funny process, but it's funny when you're like, oh, I was like doing this for like 6 hours and I was trying to tape this and I couldn't get it perfect and it wasn't going through the reel. Like, people are like, what are you talking about? Like, this sounds like it's out of like a movie or something.
Right. They think you're making it up. They don't realize how tough it was, how much creativity you spent, how much time you wasted and burned through dealing with these other physical hardware challenges of cutting the frame, splicing, reconnecting. You lose so much ability to create by having to focus on all that and making sure it comes out well. By not having to worry about that with digital, you get to pour so much more of your creative effort, your creative juices directly into that funnel to get the final product you want. And just like you said, you if you don't have it if it's not in the can, if it's not in the reel, if it's not on the tape, you don't have it. These days, if you don't have it, you hit the space bar, you pick up the camera, you go out and you get it, and then you come back and you keep editing, and nobody knows.
I was actually watching Hello Dolly last night because Hello Dolly is apparently now on Disney Plus. So okay. I always love to watch those kinds of movies, because that came out in, I believe, 69. It was complete analog. So everything that they're doing, all of the different things with any of the lighting, all of the things that they're doing with all of the editing, that had to be very meticulously planned for before the shoot. Where, today, people just go out and they'll shoot what they're going to shoot at like an event or something, but they don't have a plan in mind. So I think having that film experience, like the physical film experience, kind of puts you in a mindset of like, have a plan before you actually shoot, which I think is really important.
Now, you sound like somebody who comes from a family of artists. Do you, would you say that that's true?
Yes and no. So my parents, my dad is an orthotist and prosthetist, which means he works with custom, like if you lose a leg or lose an arm, a prosthetic, like a prosthetic limb.
Right.
And when he was in college, he had to take some art classes, so he drew. And it actually is interesting because he actually plays with plaster in the plaster room to make sure that the angle of the socket's correct, or the size, or like someone's going to have inflammation here, so let's build it out here. All of those kinds of things, which is a different kind of like artistic view on things, because it obviously is in the health field and works with the body. But that was really interesting growing up around that. And it kind of gave me like an idea of like, oh, practically, like if I were going to do this, like how would that turn into that? Like kind of a practical mindset. And then my mom, she's actually the one that taught me how to edit on the computer, or at least, guided me, because I'm pretty sure I figured that on my own. So basically, she was the information technology teacher for William Floyd School District on Long Island for a time, and she had to teach the teachers how to edit. And I actually went with her one of the times and was teaching the teachers how to edit as
Nice.
a young teenager.
That's awesome. Because the reason why I mentioned that was because I know that when you go into something in the arts, when you go to get an art degree, or it's a bachelor's in film communications. At one point, when I was trying to get a performing arts degree or a communications degree in videotape editing and TV production, at one point, a lot of the questions I was getting at home were things like, "What kind of job can you get? How much money can you earn? What kind of things are you going to be doing?" And they were challenging questions because pretty much nobody in my family had come from any kind of performance or creative background. So it was almost like trying to answer the question in a language that they weren't really able to fully speak or understand, that they weren't entirely fluent in. And I was also having to put out the fires of their worries and concerns. And I was a teenager, I didn't really know how to do any of that. So I'm guessing you didn't have that challenge in any way. You probably had all the rockets fueled up for you, the launch pad primed and pumped and ready to go for however you needed it to be, I'm guessing.
So I don't know. I would have to ask my parents, but it was one of those things where my mom and dad knew whatever I was going to do, I was going to be successful at, because I'm a very hard worker, and I will work until something happens or something goes well. I actually was working as an assistant for a real estate agent in high school. So I was helping her with her advertising. I was helping her with photos, videos, as well as doing the beginning of working events and things like that. And they saw that I was making some money, compared to the other students and things, people of my age that were doing things.
Right.
So they knew that there was at least some money in it. And even if it was just me continuing on with events, they were like, all right, Celia, you can have a wedding business. I never wanted the wedding business, but they weren't really worried about it. So when I started working and doing my internships, which I had some really impressive internships, I worked at Nickelodeon, I worked at Fox News Radio, I worked at a company that did some reality shows and things like that. And they were like, all right, whatever she kind of goes into is going to be great. And I worked and did some freelance shows, and there was never a question of oh, is Celia going to be moving home? Is she going to be able to afford X, Y, Z? I think that they always kind of knew that I would make it work somehow, and that I was very business oriented in the way that I thought about doing things and making money.
That's impressive. I can relate to you in the sense of having creativity and artistry discovered so young in life, but we diverge paths with the amount of drive and focus that you seem to have had in your youth, because it took me until my 30s before I got my life on the correct on this track, on the track of an artist. So I'm very impressed when I hear you talk about how you'd never really had a survival job and that you've almost always been exclusively an independent artist and a freelancer. I find that to be quite admirable. I don't know any other way to say it. It's impressive. Good for you.
Thank you. I'm pretty sure that real estate job where I was her assistant was the last visual job, I guess, that I had. Because even when I was in college, I was a TA, but I was it wasn't like a TA, hey, I'm going to grade your papers. It was a TA, I'm going to teach you how to use this studio camera if you can't figure out how to use this studio camera.
Right. I'm going to ramp you up into the modern world of education and communication. Well, good for you. So I had a whole list of questions here that were totally irrelevant to the things we've talked about for the past 25, 30 minutes, but our conversation was much better than what this was going to yield anyway. So this has been fantastic. I wanted to just talk real quick before we wrap things up. I wanted to ask, you're very fortunate in the sense that you have not only the skill, the tools, the resources and the support, you have the drive and the focus and the business sense. What would you say to other young artists out there, whether they be male or female, American, global, whatever, who are not having such an easy time realizing their dream, or they're being impacted by maybe the misunderstanding or the lack of support by people around them. And they want to keep going, but they're not sure if they should because they don't really feel like maybe a life in the arts is for them. Do you have anything you'd want them to hear or to know?
Oh, I have so many things I want to tell them, but I'm going to keep this kind of general just because, there's different people in different situations. Obviously, if one situation is, someone is trying to get into the industry, but they see that it's a male-dominated industry, or they see something as like, sometimes they see race or something like that as a factor, but I'm going to keep this general. The number one thing that I would say is you need to be creating. Whatever you're doing, whether it's, working with voiceover like you do, or working with the visual medium like I do, or making something like physical paintings. Show what you're doing, show the process, make people understand, because one of the problems that I had early in my career is people didn't understand what I did. They always thought, oh, the word videographer means that you work with weddings. And I was like, that's not what that means.
Right.
I do so much more than weddings. So I started posting on my Instagram behind the scenes pictures, finished products, things that kind of provide a little bit of value for people to understand what it really means to work in video. And I was doing this while I was working on the TV shows that I worked on. I was doing this while I worked at Fox News Radio. I was doing this while I was starting freelance. And honestly, it really helped because people who know you in real life, that would be the ones recommending you, doing the physical act of saying, oh, yeah, you need like social media content. I know someone that does that. Being able to educate them and have them understand when to recommend you out is super important. So for obviously photo, video, that really, you already have the content. You're already working on these things. You just need to remember, oh, snap a picture behind the camera or something like that to physically show. So that's one of my recommendations, and that one has worked out really well for me, because if there's a real estate shoot going on and I take a picture of me doing a real estate shoot and another real estate like agent sees that and says, oh, I really could use a website landing page video that explains what me and my team do, perfect. We can definitely do one. Reach out. That's great. So really educating people is my number one, no matter who it is. And then my other tip, which is I'm going to use the example of being a female in the industry, just because most of the people that I see in this industry are male. And whenever I come across a female videographer on Instagram, I'm like, oh, immediately following, because they're standing out. A lot of times females in the TV and film industry end up in producing roles and not practical using camera roles, actually. And I'm not sure if you've come across that, but the reason being is that, like, in terms of the planning aspect, females usually are the ones that are getting things done. One of the examples is, and this is an example from one of the producers that I worked with when I was working on MTV2's Binge Thinking. He said, we needed a pig for a shot. And we told the woman producer to handle it. And she walked up to the neighbor's house and said, hi, can we borrow a pig? And they said yes. So they wouldn't have let me, a bald man, borrow their pig, but this woman they let borrow a pig. And he told me that and said, go get a ladder from that hotel. I came back with a ladder.
Nice.
So that's one of the reasons, and that's not a totally fair reason, but that's one of the reasons that women end up in the planning jobs. But in terms of the practical jobs, I don't know. It's just, you don't see so many women doing video production. You see photographers, but you don't see video production as much. So I like to put that in the forefront to kind of give hope to people to keep creating and keep going. And if you are a female and you want to get into this industry, just reach out, find people that are doing it, find another woman that's doing it, find a mentor, whether that's someone at BuzzFeed, whether that's someone like me who's doing it on their own, or whether that is someone that is a camera operator or a producer or someone that you can ask questions,
Mhm.
because that's the biggest thing. And like I said, there may not be as many videographers that are, out and about for you to find, but you can definitely find a lot of women in producing.
Would you say that you're heavily outnumbered in the industry, male to female?
Um, Honestly, I feel like it depends on where you're looking in the industry. If you look
Mhm.
at somewhere like BuzzFeed, there's a lot of females working at BuzzFeed, or somewhere like Bustle. So if you're looking more in the web area, I would say, yeah, you can definitely find females. But if you look at something like the movie industry, it's a little more male centric in terms of who gets nominated for awards, or who's hired as the camera guy, or like any of those kinds of things. And I don't know what the shift is, but I feel like, especially in the world of online, you can find a lot more like female presence than you can in a corporate job like that. I don't know. That's just a visual thing. I think also it depends on the part of production, because I've seen a lot of females in like corporate or commercial or something like that, whereas in the physical, I'm going to go out and shoot jobs, not so many. Like when I was working on that
Wonder
TV
why.
show, I got really close with one of the hosts, because we were the only two girls out there. We were the only two girls on the crew.
Wow.
So I feel like maybe like in the physical production world, there are less, but that should change.
I would agree with that. In general, I just think that there's no place anymore in the modern world for any kind of distinction or,
Hmm.
differentiation between the two. If it's the kind of thing that I don't know what a good example, analogy to make, but if it's the kind of thing where a certain industry or certain type of career appeals to one gender more than another, that's fine.
Hmm.
But if it's a matter of environmental or social challenges that prevent one gender from succeeding more than the other, I just don't know where that fits in the modern world anymore.
Hmm.
I'm sure there's people who still do think that way, but I don't. I tend to think that that has more to do with maybe the older guard, maybe the the ones getting ready to go to the Florida of the industry, if you know what I mean, the ones getting ready to
Yeah.
retire.
I mean, there was never like a, hey, like hire her because it's a girl type of mentality, but it was just everyone was supporting everyone on that particular crew. It's just so happens that I was the one that was going to get the ladder. And I mean, there was one time, and I proved them wrong. There was someone that hired me as an assistant. I did more than assistant, because I'm a little ambitious, and it was just
Mhm.
the two of us on the group, the thing.
It's
So I
called
ended up
going
learning
the
a
extra
lot.
mile.
Exactly.
You're right.
But there was a little bit of lifting involved, and the the producer, like, I kind of joked at it at the actual shoot, but the person that introduced us was like, oh, he's like a little nervous because there's some lifting involved, and I was like, I go to the gym 3 times a week, maybe not during the pandemic because I haven't done anything in like 2 months, but
It's all right. We're
I
all
go to the
wearing the
gym.
quarantine 15. Don't worry.
I'm actually like doing pretty good with the diet, but back to the working out part. I was like, I'm going to the gym. I can, like, if it's a 60-pound case, that's fine. If it's an 80-pound case, like, I'll make it work. But it wasn't even anything close to that. It was like 30 pounds, and like we had a cart. But the concern was, because I was a girl, am I going to be able to move the things? Am I going to be able to do what a grip does?
Right.
But yeah, I did
That's
it, and
frustrating.
obviously, like, there was no problem. And he was like, oh my god, like, if I ever come back, I would love to work with you again. And I'm like, yeah, that's great, let me know. But there was that very slight stigma, very briefly, because
Hmm.
that was obviously disproved. Will I be able to do certain tasks? And obviously, like, that wasn't an issue. And it's something that maybe, like, that's one of the things that are stuck in the back of people's heads. Like, oh, I don't know if she'll be able to lift this. I don't know if she'll be able to do that. Like, it obviously is something that still is around in the industry, but obviously like you can prove that wrong really quickly.
Yes, you can. It's around in the world. And you sound like the kind of person who runs headfirst at those opportunities to turn them to rubble. I have a cute story for you. You'll appreciate this. My wife was an administrative assistant for an engineering firm, a global engineering firm. And it was predominantly male engineers. And they were very sort of, alpha male-ish. They go skeet shooting. They've all got big trucks. They've all got very sort of typical guy, whatever. Anyone listening already knows what I'm talking about. So she had to plan an event, like a team building event. And it was one of those go-kart racing events, where you get in a little go-kart and you drive around indoors, whatever, like a pole position type of thing. And I said, you got to go and you got to leave them all in the dust. My wife is a really good driver. She took her road test on a big giant pickup truck stick shift. She can handle machinery, like bulldozer, forklift. Like I put her up against the best. So I told her, I was like, you got to go to this event and you got to leave all those guys in the dust. You got to make them chase you around that track in that go-kart. You got to outdrive every guy in that company, every engineer who thinks they're hot stuff. You got to leave them in the dust. And she did. She totally did. They raced, and she was the only non-engineer who got a score up on the board. In fact, she drove so well, she got one of the 10 fastest laps of the entire facility for the week. Like, not just for their party, for their event, but she schooled the whole place. Like, it was one of the proudest moments of my life. I have a picture of her crossing the finish line in this go-kart, and I'm just like, yeah, go get him, baby. It was awesome.
That is amazing. I feel like me and your wife would be friends.
So we're getting ready to wrap things up. I want to just give you another moment to ask you to talk to our listeners and tell them if they need to contact you or if they know anybody who wants to utilize your services, what you do, where you do it, and how best to get in touch with you. This is your shameless plug moment here. I yield the floor to you.
All right. So my shameless plug is that you can find me on most social media platforms with Celia_Werner. So that is Instagram, Twitter, whatever you may be looking for me on. Facebook would be Celia Werner Productions. I also have Instagram for Celia Werner Productions, Celia Werner on YouTube. And you can find me at my website, CeliaWernerProductions.com. Basically, if you Google my name, I'll come up. And, if you are in the Long Island, New York area, I also do cover way further than that. I've gone as far as San Francisco. I've gone as far as San Diego. I've gone as far as every year I go to Texas and Arizona. So if there is a project that you need help with, I do travel. We just need to make sure that there is a budget for that. So, a lot of the stuff I do is here in New York, but if anyone needs help further, they can definitely reach out.
Awesome. Well, listen, thank you so much for being on. I know you had a tough couple weeks. We've been trying to work out the scheduling. For those of you listening, Celia had a mild concussion last week. So she is toughing it out and looking at blue light screens for almost an hour here with us tonight, despite severe head trauma. No, just kidding. Not severe. I'm glad.
The world spun a couple times this week when I went from laying down to sitting up. But obviously, I'm good enough to carry a conversation, and I'm definitely feeling better.
Yeah, no, she's tough. And that's the kind of effort she'll put into your project too. I trust. No, I know. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And good luck getting through the rest of COVID, the rest of quarantine. And I hope I get to talk to you soon.
Yeah, definitely. Send me a message and maybe we can hop on Zoom again one day where we're not recording ourselves for an audience.
You got it. And I'll keep my fingers crossed that you have some future clients out there who want some documentary style, deep voiced narration.
Yes, 100%. We need to incorporate you as soon as possible. We just need people that need narrators.
Yeah, I wish it was more popular than it is lately, unfortunately. Certain genres are big in voiceover. Certain genres are not utilizing narration as much as some of my peers and colleagues would like. But such is the way of life. There's different fish in different ponds, as you know.
100%.
All right, Celia, you have a great night. Thanks so much for joining us. I'll talk to you soon.
My name is Celia Werner, and you are listening to The Stage Door Show, celebrating the independent artist.